is wrong with you?
Chip, I'm all jacked up on Mountain Dew.
Oh, you know I'm all jacked up on Mountain Dew because you want to know why? The New York Giants football season's going to be starting very soon. This is Tim's New York Giants Straight Talk, powered by Online Big Blue LLC. Want to talk about something. Let's give them something to talk about. Something I want to talk about that I was talking about a friend with last night. And that's now the 2024 roster is not set, but there's probably not going to be major manipulation to this roster. And this is year 3 of the Shane Dable regime, and you had that you hope this year isn't a shit sandwich because you had the bad year. I mean, well, it'd actually be a reverse shit sandwich because you had the good year, then a bad year, then a bad year. So hopefully you're not going to have multiple bad years in a row. But I was thinking, and I was looking at the roster, and I'm trying to decide, has this team demonstratively gotten better? And I was thinking to myself, you kind of have to go back a little. And I was like, let's go back to the 2020 season. That's the 6-10 Joe Judge era, where we should have made the playoffs at 6-10, except those damn Philadelphia Eagles really screwed us. This was also the COVID season. It's interesting. It was a very interesting year. We didn't qualify for the playoffs. We did have 2 Pro Bowlers, but I was kind of looking at the roster, and I want to take a look at the roster, the 2020 roster before the season started, like before week 1, how the roster looked and where it was at compared to where we're at now. And I kind of laugh and chuckle a little bit because in some ways the 2020 roster may have been better than the roster we currently have. So in 4 years under the Shane regime, or 3 years under the Shane regime, we haven't really gotten much better compared to talent-wise. That was the off season that we brought in both Bradbury and Martinez. We also got to Kyler Frackwell, who actually played well in spurts for 4.5 sacks. Cam Fleming played well at times. You had Colt McCoy that got us that win against Seattle. And then you got a bunch of ancillary players that, not really ancillary players, because that was also the Logan Ryan team. And if you take a look at the team itself and how it was constructed, the problem was we basically 1-7, and then we hit that streak where we kind of won 4 in a row, then lost 3, and then won the Dallas game. So I can't even really go off the win-loss record. But if I look at it strictly vis-a-vis talent, well, let's start with defense. Real quick, let's just start with defense. Blake Martinez, solid player that year. Logan Ryan, solid player that year. You also had Peppers on that team, very solid. You had a young Julian Love, solid year at 64 tackles, 47 solos, 17. You also had the Pro Bowler James Bradbury. You had Leonard Williams. We had to play it.
King of the almost sack.
And that was Leonard Williams' big year. You even had Tate Crowder chipping in. You had Dexter Lawrence. You had the young Dexter Lawrence, who did have his 53 tackles and 4 sacks. You also had that guy that who I never really think we truly recovered from losing, a reference to stopping the run at times up the middle. That's Dalvin Tomlinson. Hell, Kyler Frackwell even at times gave you something with his 4 sacks and 34 tackles. You had a young B.J. Hill. You had a young Xavier McKinney. You had a Carter Coughlin that at the time was we thought he was going to be something after that Seattle game. Hell, you even had you had the Corey Ballentine, who you can really compare to Trey Hawkins right now if you want to get crazy. You had a young Lorenzo Carter. You had Madre Harper, who I always love to say that name, Madre Harper, who we went and got. I always remember that video. We stole him from the Raiders. We didn't steal shit from the Raiders. You also had Darnay Holmes on this team. Hell, even Isaac Yiadom. We always made fun of Isaac Yiadom, but he still gave you 10 starts. He still gave you 46 tackles. He was still a little bit of a player. And I look at the way this team was constructed, the 2020 team. It was literally constructed under a philosophy. And you have to say that there was I said this a million times before, there was a philosophy to this team. You may not have liked the Wink team, but the Patrick Graham defense had a philosophy. And they played to their strengths. And if you take a look at like I said, look at the talent. Look at the talent, like I said, between Martinez, Logan Ryan, Peppers, Love, Bradbury, Williams, Leonard Williams, that is, Dexter Lawrence, Dalvin Tomlinson. You have a pretty good starting core. Your middle of your offense, your defensive line was pretty good. You had Logan Ryan and Peppers playing 100% of snaps, playing those quasi linebackers / safety positions. Same with Julian Love. You had James Bradbury at a Pro Bowl level, who you can maybe compare him to, to Mr. Banks. You had a young BJ Hill, not coming into his own yet, but you had a lot of talent on this defense, and they play towards a philosophy. And like I said, I don't know what our philosophy is yet on defense, because our defense is so. I'm not gonna go over it right now, but our defense to me is just. I've said it before. I said it on the video the other day. This, in some regards, this is a cut and paste team, and we're cutting and pasting pieces, and we're gonna kind of hope they stick together. That's the 2024 Giants. But like I said, you had a young Xavier McKinney, young Carter Coughlin, young BJ Hill. You had the high hope still for Deonte Banks, who actually did have 30 tackles, 23 solo. Like I said, you had a young Dalvin Tomlinson. You had Dexter Lawrence. You had Leonard Williams, James Bradbury, Love, Peppers, Ryan, and Martinez. That's actually a pretty good core start to your defense. And then you look at this team offensively, where they were at, and where now you got to remember we had some injuries in between. Like I said, that was the year that Saquon Barkley got injured in week 2. But if you take a look who we had at times, I mean, like I said, you had Dion Lewis for 16 games. He wasn't the Packers. He was Packers. He wasn't the Patriots Lewis, but he was good enough. You also had the if you had the young Saquon Barkley until that injury in Chicago. You had Evan Ingram being targeted 109 times for 63 receptions for 650 yards and a touchdown. You also had Darius Slayton targeted 96 times for 50 and 751 and 4 touchdowns. Hell, you had Sterling Shepard with 66 receptions for 656 yards, I believe it was. And you sit there and you throw in Golden Tate, who we all know what happened with Golden Tate, who had 35 receptions for 388 yards and 11 touchdowns. You had a pretty good ground game, even with Wayne. I don't have a second gear Gallman. He got dragged down from behind in that Seattle game for 147 attempts, 682 yards, and 6 touchdowns. I mean, like I said, if you look at the skilled position players, like I said, you had a 26-year-old Ingram, a 23-year-old Slayton, a 27-year-old Sterling Shepard, and a 32-year-old Golden Tate, with Gallman and Barkley out of the backfield. That's not a terrible look for an offense, but there's one common denominator. There's always one common denominator. That common denominator, of course, is the starting quarterback. But that was a year, like I said, if you want to bash Gettleman, that was the year he took Thomas McKinney, Matt from Connecticut, who's actually playing well this year, Darnay Holmes, Shane Lemieux, I believe, is a backup center right now in is he with the Saints? I think he is. You had Cam Brown, Carter Coughlin, who's still on the team, T.J. Brunson. Like I said, anything after that, you had Tate Crowder had that one big season with that compensation pickup, Mr. Irrelevant at 255. You're starting offensive line at times. Like I said, you did have the you did have Nate Solder opt out that year, but you still had Kevin Zeidler. You had Andrew Thomas, young Andrew Thomas. You had Spencer Pulley, who didn't play bad at center. Shane Lemieux, who was terrible. You had Will Hernandez, who was pretty terrible. But you also had Nick Gates, who played well at times at center, Cam Fleming. And even Jackson Barton gave you some quality snaps. So it's not like you did have a bad offensive line, but is it really better than the offensive line we have now? I would take Zeidler over any of our guards. You still have Thomas. I thought Cam Fleming to me should have came back, but we let him walk. And then I love it because you actually had a good punter in Riley Dixon. You had Graham Gano on this team. People forget we had Graham Gano. That, you know, I mean, it's interesting. I also forgot about David Mayo over at the linebacker position, who went over to the Saints. Not Saints. He went over to Washington. But looking at this roster, looking at this 2020 roster, I cannot say I cannot look at 2024 where it stands right now and sit there and tell you, yeah, this team has gotten so much better in 4 years. Your quarterback's still a question mark. Your running back is a question mark. Really? I mean, I love it. The wide receivers at the end of that season, with all the injuries though in 2020, were C.J. Board, Austin Mack, Dante Pettis, Sterling Shepard, Slayton, and Golden Tate. I mean, Shepard and Slayton actually had a pretty good year. And like I said, you still had Evan Ingram and Caden Smith. I was never a big fan of Caden Smith. I always thought he was 2 yards in a cloud of dust. But I can't sit there and tell you that 2024 is better than 2020. And 2024 we won 2020 we won 6-10. Just something that was tickling my brain today. I can't wait because New York Knicks Unleashed, the 2024-2025 season pod is going to be on this channel. It's going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks as we get closer to training camp. I'm very excited about that. I'm very excited about the next season. I'm very excited to mix in some other stuff besides Giants content. So we're going to have a lot of fun doing that. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And even if you're not a Knicks fan, if you're an NBA fan, we're also going to talk a lot about the NBA and not just the Knicks in its totality. Well, we are going to talk about the Knicks in its totality, but not complete every day. We're also going to mix in some other NBA stuff as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So make sure you stay tuned. And as always, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to ring that bell because you want to know why. That'll be awesome.